Douglas Whitmore picked up the termination letter with 2 fingers, the way you pick up something you'd rather not touch, and flicked it across the desk toward her. It skidded to the edge. Nearly fell. He leaned back, hands folded, and looked at Renee Carter the way a man looks at a problem he has finally solved. Let's be honest, Renee. A black woman with no degree running client accounts at this level. The board talks. I held them off as long as I could. He said it gently. That was the part that made it worse. Behind her, HR Director Pam Collier added without looking up from her notepad. We did everything we could to support your success here, Renee. Sometimes a fit just isn't a fit. Renee picked up the letter. She read it. She set it back down. She walked to the door. Whitmore's voice followed her into the hallway, still calm, still smooth. Oh, and don't list me as a reference. I'd hate to have to be honest. In the corridor, a colleague she had trained 2 years ago watched her carry the cardboard box to the elevator. He did not hold the door. 7 years. Gone in 4 sentences. What Douglas Whitmore did not know, sitting back in that leather chair already reaching for his phone, was that a 16-year-old boy bussing tables 3 blocks away had been holding 1 sentence in his chest for 11 days. And when he finally said it out loud in a room of 300 people, not one of them would make a sound. Don't go anywhere. Drop your city and local time in the comments right now. I want to know who's watching this with me. And if this channel is new to you, tonight is a good night to stay. Renee Carter had not planned to stay at Whitmore and Associates. She had taken the receptionist position in the spring of 2016 as a placeholder, something to carry her through, while she figured out what came next. She was 31 years old, newly widowed, and the mother of a 4-year-old boy who still asked for his father some mornings before he was fully awake. She had a community college certificate in office administration, a planner she filled in pencil, and a habit of arriving 17 minutes early to every shift because she had read somewhere that punctuality was the one advantage anyone could give themselves for free. She had not planned to be good at the job. She simply was. By her 2nd year, she was managing correspondence for 3 senior partners. By her 3rd, she was running project timelines for clients she had never been formally introduced to. By her 5th, she was coordinating the firm's largest active accounts, reviewing proposals, attending client meetings, absorbing the kind of institutional knowledge that normally takes a decade to earn. Her title still read Senior Project Coordinator. Her salary had risen twice. Both times she accepted the number without negotiating because she did not yet know that was an option. The most important thing Renee Carter ever did for Whitmore and Associates happened on a Tuesday morning in March of 2019. She had been tracking a development company out of Seattle called Pacific Coast Design Group for 8 months, reading their annual reports, studying their portfolio, mapping their expansion east. She drafted an introductory letter on a Saturday afternoon while Marcus was at a friend's house, then brought it to Whitmore on Monday morning. He skimmed it. He told her it was a long shot. He told her she could send it under the firm's letterhead if she wanted to spend her time that way. She sent it. 6 weeks later, Gerald Huang, president of Pacific Coast Design Group, flew to Chicago. Renee met him at the airport. She took him to dinner at a restaurant she had researched for 3 days. She listened to him talk for nearly 2 hours before she said a single word about the firm. At the end of the evening, Huang set down his glass, looked at her, and said, "I want to work with people who listen. I'll be in touch with your firm by Monday." He was. The Pacific Coast account opened at $2.4 million. It renewed twice. It became the single largest contract in Whitmore and Associates' 30-year history. At the all-staff meeting that spring, Whitmore thanked her in front of everyone. One sentence: "We'd like to acknowledge Renee Carter for her contribution to the Pacific Coast relationship." Then he moved to the next slide. Sandra Okafor, 2 seats away, caught Renee's eye across the table. Renee looked down at her planner. The overtime accumulated the way most injustices do not in a single dramatic event, but in small increments that seem manageable right up until they are not. Late evenings, weekend calls, a Thursday client dinner on the same night Marcus had a school concert she had promised to attend. She logged every hour, dates, start times, end times, project names. By winter of 2022, the total came to approximately $18,000 in uncompensated time. She had not decided what to do with that number. She kept logging it anyway. The senior associate posting went up in September. It was a title Renee had been carrying in practice for 2 years without the paper, without the pay, and without anyone saying so out loud. She read the listing twice. She applied that afternoon. She was the only internal candidate. 3 weeks later, Whitmore called her into his office. She sat across from him. Before he spoke, she noticed 2 things. The blinds were angled against the afternoon light, and there was no water on the table, the small, reflexive hospitality he extended to conversations he expected to last. This one, she understood immediately, he did not. Claire Holt, he explained, had a background in client development that closely aligned with the firm's strategic direction. Strong academic credentials. The partners felt the fit was right. Claire has been here 14 months, Renee said. We value institutional depth, Renee. This isn't a reflection of your contributions. She did not point out the contradiction. 7 years had taught her that pointing out Whitmore's contradictions was an expenditure with no return. I understand, she said. She thanked him. She stood, walked to the 3rd-floor bathroom, turned on the cold tap, and held both hands under the water until the feeling in them changed. She looked at her face in the mirror. She stayed there a while. That evening, she drove home without telling anyone. Marcus was at the kitchen table with his homework and asked how her day was. She said, "Long. How was yours?" She listened to him talk about a history project. She passed him the bread. She kept her voice at exactly the pitch of ordinary. She would tell him she decided once she figured out what she was going to do about it. 2 weeks passed. She went to work. She logged her hours. Then at 8:14 on a Thursday morning, her phone rang. Whitmore's assistant. Her voice had the flat, deliberate quality of someone delivering a message rather than beginning a conversation. Mr. Whitmore would like to see you. He said to come now. Renee set down her coffee. She picked up her planner. She walked to his office. The blinds were already down. Pam Collier from HR was already seated. Neither of them offered water. She understood before she sat down that this meeting had already been decided. She sat down anyway. Because that is what you do when you have spent 7 years doing the right thing and have not yet run out of reasons to keep going. She was about to run out. The thing about Douglas Whitmore Renee had always known was that he was good at the soft landing. He did not shout. He did not pace. He sat very still and kept his voice at a precise professional temperature, the kind that sounds, if you're not paying attention, almost like regret. He was sitting like that now. It was 8:40 in the morning. The blinds were shut. Pam Collier from HR was already in the chair to the left, a legal pad open on her knee pen, uncapped. Neither of them looked at Renee when she walked in. That was the first signal. The second was the single printed sheet lying at the center of the desk turned so it faced her. She sat down. She looked at it. An email. Sent from r.carter@whitmore-assoc.net. Dated 6 days prior. The recipient, a project director at Hammond Group, the firm's primary competitor across the river. Attached to the email, according to the summary below the header, were 3 files, Pacific Coast Design Group's current renewal proposal, the updated fee schedule for the coming fiscal year, and the preliminary schematics for the O'Hare corridor expansion. Renee looked at the email address again. r.carter@whitmore-asoc.net. Not her address. Her address was r.carter@whitmore-associates.net. One missing word. The kind of difference invisible at a glance. "Can you tell us about this Renee?" Whitmore asked. "This didn't come from me," she said. Her voice was steady. She had not planned it to be steady. It simply was. "The domain is registered to the firm," Pam Collier said, not looking up from her pad. "That address is not my address." Whitmore picked up the printout and set it back down without looking at it. "The domain was created 2 weeks ago. The email logs show it accessed our shared drive through your login credentials." "Someone used my credentials," Renee said. "That's different from me sending it." Silence. She looked at Pam Collier's pad. Pam had not written a single word. "I'd like to see the server logs," Renee said. "The full access history, not just the summary." "That's currently under IT review," Whitmore said. "Then I'd like to speak with someone from legal before we continue." Pam Collier glanced at Whitmore. A small glance, quick enough that Renee almost missed it. "This is an internal HR conversation, Renee. It's not that kind of meeting." The words landed quietly. But they landed the way things land when the decision was made before you walked in the door. Renee understood in that moment what this room was. Not an investigation. A formality. The decision already signed somewhere above this floor, the meeting a courtesy offered so they could say later that she had been consulted. She was suspended pending investigation effective immediately. Her building access would be temporarily restricted while HR completed its review. They would be in touch within the week. She was in touch within 6 days. Not by phone, by email. The subject line read, "Termination of employment, Renee Carter." The body cited cause breach of confidentiality and fiduciary duty. Attached was a form she had not signed. No findings had been shared with her. No IT review results, no server logs. Her access card had already been deactivated the morning the email was sent. She discovered this at 7:52 a.m. when she arrived at the building out of habit, she would later realize. She had nowhere to go, and the reader blinked red twice and did not open the door. She went to the security desk. The guard was a man named Larry, who had worked the 7 a.m. shift for 4 years, and who always nodded at her in the elevator. He did not nod now. He looked at his screen. He looked at her. He said in the voice of a man who had been briefed, "I'm going to need to walk you up to collect your personal items, Ms. Carter." She did not argue. She did not cry. She followed him to the elevator to the 31st floor to her desk. The cardboard box was already on the chair. She packed it methodically, her planner a photograph of Marcus at 9 years old, standing on Navy Pier, a small cactus Sandra had given her for the windowsill, the coffee mug she had brought from home on her first day and never taken back. The planner she held for a moment, before she put it in. 7 years of logged hours. She put it in. Larry carried the box to the lobby. She carried nothing. She sat in her car in the underground garage for 41 minutes. She did not turn the ignition. She looked at the concrete pillar across from her and counted its seams 12 from floor to ceiling. She counted them twice. Then she drove home. Marcus was at school. The apartment was quiet. She set her keys on the counter, hung her coat, and sat down at the kitchen table. She did not turn on a light. The winter sun came in at a low angle through the blinds and drew pale lines across the table, and she watched them move slowly, the way light moves when you are sitting still and time is doing something strange. She did not move until she heard his key in the lock at 3:45. Marcus came in, dropped his backpack by the door, and stopped. He looked at her face. He had his father's eyes, something she usually kept in a place she did not visit often, and right now they were very careful and very still. He did not speak for a full count of 10. Then, "Mom, what happened?" She looked at her son. She looked at the pale lines on the table. She had told herself she would wait until she figured out what she was going to do. She had been sitting at this table for 6 hours, and she still did not know, so she told him. The unemployment claim came back denied on a Tuesday morning. The rejection letter cited a single reason terminated for cause. It used the phrase, "gross misconduct." Renee read those 2 words 3 times before she put the paper face down on the kitchen table and pressed both palms flat against it the way you press against something to make it stop moving. She filed an appeal the same afternoon. The form required a written statement detailing the circumstances of the termination. She spent 2 evenings on it, writing everything accurately, in order, without embellishment. She was not sure that accuracy would be enough. She filed it anyway because not filing it would mean accepting a word misconduct that was not hers to carry. The appeal moved at the speed of something that did not know she had rent due. The rent was $2,400 a month for a 1-bedroom in Wicker Park that she had moved into when Marcus was 7. She had managed it on $67,000 a year at Whitmore, which left after taxes and Marcus's charter school tuition almost enough. Almost. Now she had none of it. She applied to 4 firms in the first week. 2 replied with automated acknowledgments. 1 went quiet after a second-round screening call that had genuinely felt promising. The project director had laughed at something she said, and she had allowed herself briefly to think about what it might feel like to have a salary again. The last replied within 48 hours with a brief, polished message that wished her well. She applied to 3 more the following week. She told herself something would break before the 60 days were up. She had been telling herself this for 3 weeks. Then Sandra texted from the office. "Renee, heads up. Someone is calling around. I heard Pam Collier on the phone with someone from Carlyle Group on Friday. Be careful. Carlyle Group was the largest architecture recruiter in the Midwest." Renee set her phone down. She stood at the kitchen window for a long time, looking out at the fire escape, at the pigeon that sat on the railing every morning, at the small stretch of alley below. Then she went back to her desk and kept applying. The 60-day eviction notice arrived on a Thursday. The building manager did not knock. He slid it under the door in a standard white envelope, the kind used for utility bills, the kind that gives nothing away. Marcus found it first. He had come out of the bathroom in his school uniform and seen it on the floor by the door. He stood there for a moment before he picked it up, read it, and placed it face down on the kitchen counter. He made her tea. He set it next to the envelope without comment. Then he sat down, ate a bowl of cereal, and went to school. Renee found the envelope and the tea when she came out at 7. She read the notice standing up. 60 days. The building manager had added in handwriting at the bottom that this was a courtesy period, as the lease technically allowed 30, as if courtesy was something he was giving her. She drank the tea. She did not touch the envelope again. Marcus had been working 3 nights a week at Sable since the previous spring, enough for transportation money, and the occasional contribution to the household grocery fund that he presented not as a contribution, but as coincidence. "Mom!" I grabbed some stuff at the store. I was right there anyway. After the eviction notice, the 3 nights became 5, without any conversation. He simply picked up the shifts, came home after midnight on weeknights, did his homework at the kitchen table, and went to sleep. She found him one night at 12:20 a.m., still in his black service shirt, slumped forward with his face turned sideways on his folded arm, his history textbook open to a page about the New Deal. One hand rested beside the book. He had been 16 for 4 months. She stood in the kitchen doorway. Then she took her coat from the hook and laid it carefully over his shoulders. She did not sleep that night. He kept a homework journal, a black composition notebook he had been filling since 9th grade, initially for assignments, then gradually for other things, notes, observations, things he wanted to remember and did not know what to do with yet. She had never read it. It was his. But one afternoon she came into the kitchen and saw it open on the table while he was at school, a page near the middle, writing she did not read. She was not a woman who read her son's private notebooks. She turned away and went to make lunch. That evening, when he came home, he put his backpack down and looked at where the notebook had been. At her. He sat down across the table. "Mom," he said, "did you do what they said?" She looked at her son. She looked at his eyes, which were careful and direct, and carrying something she could not quite name. "No, baby," she said. "I did not." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once, not with relief, not with sympathy, but with the quiet, settled quality of someone who has just received confirmation of something they already knew. "Okay," he said. He picked up the notebook. He went to his room. She heard the door close softly behind him. She sat at the table a long time after that. She thought about the way he had said, "Okay," not as comfort, not as reassurance, but as conclusion, like the closing of a chapter, like the beginning of something else. She did not know yet what that something was. In his room, Marcus opened the notebook to the page with the November 4th entry. He read his own handwriting once slowly. He closed the notebook. He sat on the edge of his bed in the dark and stayed very still for a long time. Then he made a decision. The night it happened, Marcus had been assigned to the private dining room on Sable's second floor. He worked evening shifts 3 nights a week, bussing tables, refilling water glasses, moving between the kitchen and the pass. The work required a particular kind of attention present enough to anticipate what a table needed, invisible enough that no one noticed you doing it. Marcus was good at this. The floor manager had told him his first week that the best staff were the ones guests couldn't remember seeing. Marcus had made that a personal standard. November 4th was the Tuesday. He signed in at 6, assigned upstairs at 6:30. When a private reservation came through 2 guests early evening, the word discretion typed in the notes field of the booking form. He carried the water glasses up without thinking much about it. He recognized Douglas Whitmore before he had fully stepped through the service door. Whitmore sat with his back to the room coat folded over the chair behind him, one hand resting loose on the table. Marcus had seen him once before, at the firm's holiday party 3 years ago, when Renee had brought Marcus as her guest. He had been 12. He had stood beside his mother in a button-down shirt and shaken hands with a man in a charcoal suit who had not quite looked at him. That same man was now 6 feet away and still was not looking at him. This time Marcus was glad for it. The man across from Whitmore was perhaps 50 Chinese American in a navy suit that fit the way expensive things fit almost effortlessly. He held his wine glass with the easy grip of someone long accustomed to rooms like this. Marcus had seen this man too at the holiday party. His mother had pointed him out from across the room, and her voice had carried something quiet, deliberate, and proud. "That's Gerald Huang, Pacific Coast Design Group. He's our biggest client. I brought him in." Marcus refilled their glasses twice during the meal. He moved with measured steps between the table and the service pass, keeping his attention on the glassware, his ears on the room. He was invisible. They spoke freely. He did not catch every word. He caught enough. Whitmore leaning forward. "Come over fully, Gerald. We fold your entire account under my name, going forward 20% reduction. I handle everything personally. Renee's team built the foundation. We honor that. but the name on the contract should reflect who is actually running this firm. A pause. Huang turned his glass slowly. Whitmore again quieter. She won't be an issue. I'm handling that this week. Marcus stood at the service station with a water pitcher in his hand and did not move for 3 full seconds. He was 16 years old. He was standing in a restaurant in his work uniform, listening to his mother's boss arrange the end of her career over a private dinner with the client she had brought to the firm herself. He did one thing. He reached into his chest pocket, angled his phone between the edge of the service door and the frame, and pressed the shutter once. His hand was not entirely steady. The image came out slightly blurred, slightly crooked. Whitmore's profile, Huang's face, the candlelight between them, the private dining number visible at the edge of the frame. Real. He noted the time on his clock-out sheet when the shift ended 9:49 p.m. That night at the kitchen table, after his mother had gone to sleep, he opened his homework journal and wrote November 4th. Sable Table 9, Private Dining, 9:47 p.m. Douglas Whitmore and Gerald Huang. He wrote what he had heard exact words where he had them paraphrase where he didn't, and put a single asterisk beside, "She won't be an issue. I'm handling that this week." He did not tell her. He was 16. He did not know yet what he was allowed to do with what he knew. He held the journal entry and the photograph for 11 days. Then his mother sat at the kitchen table with a termination letter, an unemployment denial, and an eviction notice laid out in front of her. She did not cry. She got quiet. Not the quiet of tiredness, the other kind. The kind that meant the road ahead was long, and she had just begun to understand how far she was going to have to walk it alone. Marcus went to his room. He opened the journal to the November 4th page. He read it once. Then again. He pulled up the firm's website on his phone and found the hour history page. Under the year 2019, a landmark year, the firm secured the Pacific Coast Design Group account, cementing its place among Chicago's premier architecture practices. No mention of his mother, not a single word. He read the line twice. He set his phone face down on the desk. He opened the journal to the space below the November 4th entry below the asterisk in slightly different ink and wrote 4 words. "I am going to say something." He closed the journal. The next morning before school, he made 2 cups of coffee. His mother had started taking it black, and he had quietly noted this over the past few weeks. He set one in front of her. He sat down across the table. He opened the journal to the November 4th page and slid it across to her without speaking. She read it. He watched her face carefully. He saw the exact moment she went still, not tired, still, but the other kind. The kind that comes when something very large has just snapped clearly into focus. "Mom," he said, "there's a photo too. I was clocked in when I took it." Renee looked at the photograph for a long time without speaking. The image was slightly blurred at the edges, the candlelight lending it an accidental warmth it did not deserve. But the faces were clear enough. Whitmore's profile, Huang's careful expression, the private dining number on the placard at the edge of the table. She could make out the watch on Huang's wrist. She looked at the file metadata. Date November 4th. Time 9:49 p.m. She set the phone down slowly, pressed the back of her hand against her mouth, and sat that way for a full 10 seconds. Then she lowered her hand and looked at her son. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning." He told her. All of it. The booking form, the 2 guests, the way he had positioned himself by the service door, the exact words he remembered and the ones he had approximated. The clock-out sheet, the journal entry he had written that same night at this table while she slept 12 feet away. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" she asked. I didn't know what it meant yet, Marcus said. And then you got fired and I did. She nodded. She did not say anything more about that. That afternoon, she called Nadine Brooks. Nadine was a civil rights attorney who had spent 22 years handling wrongful termination and employment discrimination cases out of a firm on Wabash Avenue. She was also the woman in the apartment directly next door, separated from Renee's kitchen by one shared wall and 6 years of the particular closeness that comes from hearing each other's lives without intending to. They had shared a hallway, occasional groceries left outside each other's doors, and one Thanksgiving when Renee's oven had broken and Nadine had wordlessly set an extra plate. They did not ask much of each other. Renee was asking now. Nadine came over that evening. She sat at the kitchen table with her legal pad and listened to everything without writing a single word for the first 15 minutes. She looked at the photograph. She looked at the file metadata. She read the November 4th journal entry twice Marcus had said it in front of her, without being asked already open to the right page. When she had finished reading, she looked at Marcus. What time did you clock in that night? 6:02 p.m. The restaurant keeps the timesheets. I can request a copy, I've done it before. And you photographed this from the service entrance. The door between the service corridor and the private room. I was standing in the frame. Nadine wrote on her pad for a moment. Then, the email they used to fire you, you said the address had one word missing. Mine is r.carter@whitmore-associates.net, Renee said. The fake was r.carter@whitmore-assoc.net. No one who wasn't looking for it would have caught it. And they refused to show you the server logs. IT review, they said. Nadine looked at her pad. I'm going to file a formal discovery request for those logs. If someone inside the firm created that domain, the registration IP is going to point somewhere specific. These things always do. The registration IP pointed directly to Whitmore's administrative wing. The response came back 11 days later, released under subpoena, after Nadine had filed, followed up, and filed again. The spoofed domain had been registered from an IP address assigned to the 31st floor, not Renee's workstation, not a shared server, but the administrative cluster used exclusively by Whitmore's personal assistant. Registration timestamp, October 29th, October 14. The fake email had been sent November 5th. Renee had been terminated 6 days after that. The trail was not circumstantial. It was a straight line. Nadine called Renee at 8:23 in the evening. Her voice was controlled in the way a lawyer's voice is controlled when she has been proved right and is making a deliberate choice not to say so. Renee, we have it. 4 days after that. On a Tuesday night, Renee's phone rang from a number she did not recognize. She almost ignored it. Frank Delgado's voice was quiet on the other end. He sounded like a man who had been rehearsing this sentence for a long time and had arrived at the version he could manage. I didn't know it would go this far. I want you to know that. Are you willing to say that on the record, Frank? A long silence. The kind that had its own shape. He hung up. Renee sat with the phone for a while. He had called. He had said sorry. He had not offered to testify. She weighed these 3 things separately before she set the phone down. He would make his own reckoning with that. It wasn't hers to carry. Later that night, she told Marcus what Nadine had found and what it meant. She told him the case was building. She told him he had already done enough: the journal, the photograph, the timeline. You don't have to do anything public, she said. Nadine has what she needs. Marcus looked at her from across the table. He had just come back from a 5-hour shift. His service shirt was still on. Mom, he said, I'm working 5 nights a week so we can stay in this apartment. I was in that room. I heard what he said. I'm doing this." She looked at her son for a long time. She thought about the 11 days he had carried this quietly without complaint, without using it as leverage, waiting until he understood what it was worth. She thought about the 4 words he had written in that journal. She did not argue with him. That weekend, Nadine called with her calendar open. The Architecture Excellence Gala is in 13 days. Douglas Whitmore is receiving the firm's Lifetime Achievement Award. Gerald Huang will be in attendance as a presenting sponsor. A pause. If Marcus happened to be in that room. "Who do you think they booked for catering?" Marcus said from the hallway, not looking up from his phone. Both women were quiet for a moment. Then Nadine said, "Okay, here is exactly what we are going to do." The Chicago Cultural Center's grand ballroom did not look like a place where anything could go wrong. Crystal chandeliers threw warm light across 300 guests in black tie and cocktail dress. White tablecloths covered every surface. A string quartet played something elegant near the entrance, and the Chicago Tribune's photographer moved along the perimeter with quiet professionalism, capturing handshakes and toasting glasses, and the satisfied faces of people who had decided, well before arriving, that tonight would confirm everything they already believed about themselves. Marcus arrived at 5:30 p.m. with the catering crew. He signed his name on the check-in sheet, was issued a locker number and a uniform bag, and changed in the staff room at the end of the basement corridor. White service shirt, black trousers, non-slip shoes he had worn through 8 months of evening shifts. He looked exactly like someone no one was going to look at. He took the service elevator to the main floor and spent the first hour setting up carrying trays, positioning glassware, reviewing his station assignments with the floor captain. He worked the way he always worked, methodically, without wasted motion, keeping his face neutral and his eyes moving. He found Gerald Huang at 6:47 p.m. Table 7, 4 rows from the stage, close enough to the front that the podium lighting touched the edge of his seat. Same navy suit as the dinner at Sable. Same watch. He was speaking with 2 other men and appeared comfortable, present, engaged. He looked, Marcus thought, like a man who had not yet been told the full story of where he was sitting. Marcus noted the table number and moved on. Claire Holt was near the bar in a dress that fit impeccably, but seemed to carry a weight she had not expected when she put it on that evening. She laughed at the right moments throughout the night. Marcus observed this, with the particular attentiveness of someone who had been trained to read tables, but the laugh never quite reached her eyes before it was gone. She looked more than once toward the entrance. Marcus could not tell if she was waiting for someone or hoping someone would not come. Frank Delgado stood alone near the far end of the bar with a glass he had been nursing for 40 minutes. He held it with both hands the way people hold something when they need something to hold. He watched the door more than he watched the stage. He had the posture of a man rehearsing something. Douglas Whitmore arrived at 7:15. He worked the room the way he had always worked rooms, moving from cluster to cluster, with a hand extended and a name already in his mouth before the other person had finished turning around. He was comfortable in the deep, effortless way of someone who has never had cause to question whether they belong somewhere. He shook 40 hands in 20 minutes. He thanked people for coming. He touched shoulders. He laughed loudly and authentically at things that were only marginally funny. Marcus watched him from the service station near the back wall and felt something settle in his chest. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter and more precise than anger. The program began at 8:05. The firm's managing director took the stage first, running through the evening's agenda and thanking the sponsors. Gerald Huang was listed among them. There was a brief round of applause. Huang nodded from table 7 with modest acknowledgement. The award presentation came third on the program. Douglas Whitmore. The managing director began, his voice carrying the particular reverence of someone reading from a script he genuinely believes has spent 30 years building a firm rooted in integrity in community investment and in the belief that great architecture begins with great people, people who are given the opportunity to do their best work. The applause was warm. 300 people in a crystal-lit room certain they were witnessing something earned. Marcus was clearing a table near the back wall. He picked up a half-finished glass of sparkling water. He looked at the stage. He looked at Gerald Huang at table 7. He looked at his own reflection, faint and distorted in the surface of the glass he was holding. He set the glass on his tray. He reached into his chest pocket and felt the edge of his phone with 2 fingers. The way you check for something you need to know is still there. He was not shaking. He had expected to be shaking. He was not. He thought about his mother's coat on his shoulders at midnight. He thought about 4 words written in slightly different ink at the bottom of a journal page. He thought about the way she had looked at him across the kitchen table that morning. Not with expectation, not with hope exactly, but with the particular attention of someone who had decided quietly and without ceremony to trust something. He set his tray down on the service station. He straightened his collar with both hands. He stepped out from behind the table. A floor manager in a headset moved to his left. "Hey, you can't." Marcus stepped around him without breaking stride. The floor manager said something into his headset. Marcus did not look back. At the edge of the stage, an event coordinator in a black blazer put one hand firmly on his shoulder. She was perhaps 30, with the expression of someone who had handled disruptions before and was already calculating the most efficient resolution. "Sir, this area is not—" Marcus stopped. He looked at her directly. He was 16 years old in a service shirt and black trousers, and he had been awake since 5:30 that morning. "I just need 1 minute," he said. Something in his voice, the specific, unperformable steadiness of it, made her hand release. He stepped to the microphone. The room went quiet. The room did not react the way rooms react in movies. There was no immediate outrage, no rising murmur, no collective sharp intake of breath. What happened instead was simpler, and in some ways more unsettling. 300 people stopped making noise at exactly the same moment. The string quartet near the entrance had paused between pieces. The waitstaff had stilled. Even the ambient sound of glassware, that constant crystal undertone underlying every gathering like this, went quiet, as though the room itself was holding its breath to find out what kind of moment it was standing inside. A 16-year-old boy in a service shirt stood at the microphone. He was perhaps 5'9", with his mother's careful posture and something watchful and steady behind his eyes. He had buttoned his collar all the way to the top, which made him look younger and more formal at once. His hands were at his sides. He was not holding anything, no notes, no phone, nothing to stand behind, nothing to. Several people would remark on this later, the hands at the sides, the buttoned collar, the stillness. Douglas Whitmore stood at the podium 6 feet to the left, his Lifetime Achievement Award in one hand, and a smile that had not yet decided what it needed to be. "Son," Whitmore said, keeping his voice at the smooth, managing frequency of a man who is not yet alarmed, but is calculating very quickly, "this isn't really the moment." Marcus did not look at him. He looked at Whitmore first long enough that the room understood it was deliberate, and then he turned unhurried toward table 7. Gerald Huang was watching from his seat. His wine glass was on the table. His hands were in his lap. He was very still. Marcus said, "Mr. Whitmore, the man you had dinner with at Sable on November 4th is Mr. Gerald Huang, and he is the client my mother brought to this firm in 2019, before you fired her for doing exactly what you were doing to her." The room did not erupt. It did something worse. It went completely and absolutely silent. Not the polite quiet of an attentive audience, the other kind. The kind that fills a space when something true has been said in public for the first time, and nobody knows yet what to do with it. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. The Tribune photographer's flash fired, once reflexive. Involuntary before he seemed to catch himself. He did not lower the camera. Whitmore's face did what faces do when a carefully maintained expression meets something it was not built to contain. The smile remained technically in place, but the structure beneath it had given way. His jaw had set. His hand gripping the award had gone very still. At table 7, Gerald Huang reached out and set his wine glass down with the slow, deliberate motion of a man who needs his hands completely empty before he can think clearly. Marcus reached into his chest pocket. He placed his phone flat on the podium, face up. What happened next was not part of any plan. The AV technician at the rear of the room, confused by the sudden departure from the program, pressed a button on instinct. The one that mirrored the podium's active display to the hall's main projection screen. The photograph appeared, 12 feet wide on the screen behind the stage, Whitmore's profile, Huang's face across a candlelit table, the private dining number at the edge of the frame, slightly blurred, slightly crooked. Taken at 9:49 p.m. on November 4th, by a teenager standing in a service doorway, invisible in exactly the way he had been trained to be. 300 people looked at it in silence. Whitmore placed his award on the podium. He set one hand flat on its surface. His head of legal seated at the front table rose halfway out of his chair and stopped there. Marcus stepped back from the microphone. He walked at the same unhurried pace he had used to approach it back to the service station at the rear wall. He picked up his tray. He lifted a half-finished glass from the nearest table and placed it in position. He straightened the folded napkin at the edge of the station, the way the floor captain had shown him his first week of training. Then he continued clearing. There is something that happens when a person returns without ceremony to their work, after saying something that changes a room, as if the words belong to the room now, not to them. Several guests would try to describe this later and find they didn't have quite the right language. What most of them arrived at, eventually, was that it had been the most dignified thing they had witnessed in a very long time. 300 people sat with the photograph on the screen above them and watched a boy clear water glasses at the back of the room. One of Whitmore's attorneys leaned toward the managing director and said something very quietly. The managing director was still looking at the screen with the expression of someone doing a rapid and unwelcome calculation. Whitmore had not moved from the podium. He had spent 30 years in rooms where he controlled the narrative every meeting, every difficult conversation. The narrative had just been taken from him by someone not old enough to vote, who did not own a suit, and who had already returned to his station and resumed working with the same quiet efficiency he brought to every shift. The Tribune photographer had not lowered his camera. At table 7, Gerald Huang looked at Whitmore for a long time. Not with anger, with the particular careful expression of a man who has just seen the underside of something he thought he understood completely. Then he pushed back his chair. He stood up. Gerald Huang did not sit back down. He stood at table 7 and straightened his jacket with the composed, deliberate movement of a man who chooses his moments carefully. The room was still watching him, 300 people who had been watching a projection screen and were now watching a real person decide in real time what he was going to do with what he had just seen. He looked at Whitmore. He looked at the screen. He looked at the photograph one more time. Then he spoke. His voice carried without effort the way the voices of men accustomed to being listened to carry. I want to make something clear to this room. I signed a contract renewal with Douglas last month under the specific understanding that Renee Carter was still leading my account. I was told she had left the firm voluntarily. I was not told she had been terminated. He paused. I will be speaking with my legal team before the evening continues, and I will be looking into this directly." He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. He did not look at Whitmore as he passed the stage. The Tribune photographer caught him in 3 frames, chin-level expression, unreadable, the measured walk of a man who has already made his decision and sees no reason to hurry it. Each frame was sharp. The applause that had filled the room 20 minutes earlier did not return. Frank Delgado set down his drink at the bar. He crossed the room to the cluster of partners standing near the stage and spoke quietly for approximately 90 seconds. 2 of them went pale. The third excused himself and made a call from the hallway with his back turned. Frank did not stay to see how it landed. He walked to the coat check, retrieved his coat, and left. That night, Nadine filed. She worked from her desk on Wabash Avenue until 2 a.m. complaint, and supporting documentation submitted simultaneously to the Cook County Circuit Court and the Illinois Department of Labor. The filing cited wrongful termination wage theft and defamation of character through the deliberate sabotage of Renee's professional references. The spoofed email address was listed as direct evidence of fabrication. Attached the server logs, the photograph with full metadata, the November 4th journal entry, and Marcus's certified Sable timesheet confirming his presence at the restaurant at 9:49 p.m. on the night in question. Every timestamp aligned. The record was clean. 48 hours later, the Tribune ran the story. The headline was precise and unadorned. Catering staff's son exposes Chicago architecture firm at annual awards gala. The article noted the photograph, the one-word gap between the email addresses, the $18,000 in uncompensated overtime, and the fact that Pacific Coast Design Group had confirmed it was reviewing its relationship with the firm. By Friday, the story was in national outlets. By the following Monday, it had been picked up overseas. The Illinois Department of Labor opened a formal inquiry into wage practices at Whitmore and Associates that same week. The firm's IT provider, facing its own potential liability, voluntarily submitted the complete server log record to Nadine without waiting for a second subpoena. The origin of the spoofed domain was now a matter of public record, registered from an IP address in Whitmore's own administrative wing on October 29th, 6 days before the forged email was sent. Frank Delgado submitted a written supporting statement 4 days after the gala, sent directly to Nadine's firm without being prompted a second time. His statement confirmed that the promotion process for the senior associate role had not been handled equitably and that he had not spoken up. 2 days after submitting it, he resigned from the firm, effective immediately. Within 9 days of the gala, Whitmore's remaining partners convened a closed-door session. The vote was not close. His name would remain on the building. His keycard would not work in the morning. The settlement was negotiated over 3 weeks. Back pay the documented $18,000 in uncompensated overtime damages for the sustained and deliberate campaign against her professional reputation, and attorney fees covered entirely as a separate line. The total figure came to $74,000. Nadine called Renee with the number on a Tuesday evening, and Renee sat at the kitchen table and did not say anything for a moment. "That's what it's worth," she said finally. "That's what we can prove in 30 days, Nadine said. "We could go further. It would take 2 years. Renee was quiet for a moment. "Send me the paperwork." 3 days later, Gerald Huang called her directly, not through attorneys. He called her personal phone on a Wednesday afternoon, and when she answered, he said, "Ms. Carter, I owe you an apology. I should have asked more questions before I signed anything." "Yes," she said. "You should have." A pause. The honest kind. "I'd like to make it right if there's a way to do that." She told him she would think about it. 2 days after that, the firm called. The HR contact read the offer carefully. Her original position restored the senior associate title she had been passed over for and a salary adjustment to reflect the role she had actually been performing. The contact's voice was professionally warm in the way voices are when someone has been instructed to convey that a generous offer is being made and should be received accordingly. Renee listened to every word without interrupting. When the contact finished, there was a brief silence on the line. "I'll need to think about it," Renee said. She hung up. She sat with her coffee. She looked at the kitchen window and at the pigeon that had been sitting on the fire escape railing every morning for 3 months, like something that did not know it was supposed to leave. She already knew the answer. Renee Carter did not return to Whitmore and Associates. The settlement was signed on a Thursday. The following Tuesday, she met Gerald Huang at a coffee shop on Wabash Avenue, not his office at her request. They sat with their coffee and spoke plainly the way people speak when they have acknowledged what went wrong and are deciding what, if anything, to build after it. He told her Pacific Coast was expanding its Chicago presence. The city office would need a director of project relations, someone who understood the local market, the architectural landscape, and most importantly, how to earn a client's trust over the course of a long dinner. "You know what the job actually is," he said. "You built it. Salary $96,000 a year. An equity stake in the Chicago office once it reached its second operating year. The account she had brought in from a cold call in the spring of 2019, now hers to lead with her name on the contract. She started in April. Her office was on the 14th floor of a building on the river. The window faced the water. She stood at it on her first morning with her coffee and looked at the way the light came off the surface and thought about several things without putting any of them into words. She bought a new planner. Pencil. The eviction notice had been withdrawn the week the settlement cleared. The back rent was paid. The apartment in Wicker Park, with Marcus's pullout in the living area that he had slept on for 3 months without once complaining, was theirs again firmly and without condition. Marcus declined the Tribune's interview request on a Wednesday morning. He sent 2 sentences from his school email. "I appreciate the interest. My mom is the story, not me." He went back to his textbooks. He kept his shifts at Sable through the summer, saving for a laptop that was 2 months away. Sandra Okafor joined Pacific Coast alongside Renee Senior Client Liaison, a role created around work Sandra had been performing at Whitmore without title or additional pay for 4 years. She accepted without negotiating and without mentioning that she had been quietly updating her resume since the morning Renee was walked to the lobby with a cardboard box. 3 weeks after the settlement, Claire Holt called. Renee answered. She had not decided in advance whether she would. Claire's voice carried the particular weight of someone who has been living with something and has finally stopped trying to set it down in a way that is comfortable. She said she had known the promotion process was wrong. She said she had not spoken up. She said she was sorry, and she let the silence sit between them when she was finished, rather than filling it with more words. "I know Claire," Renee said. She meant it, and she did not entirely mean it, and both were true. She let it go. Not for Claire's sake, but because she had spent enough time carrying things that were not hers. One afternoon in May, looking for a phone charger in Marcus's room, Renee found the homework journal on his desk. She opened it to the November 4th page. She read his handwriting, neat, careful 16-year-old print, the date and time, the dialogue he had reconstructed from memory, the asterisk beside, "She won't be an issue," and at the very bottom in slightly different ink, "I'm going to say something." She stood there for a long moment. Then she closed the journal and put it back exactly where she had found it. She had the photograph framed. The original file, printed on Michigan Avenue, slightly blurred and slightly crooked, taken at 9:49 p.m. by a hand that was not entirely steady. She put it on the kitchen shelf between a small succulent and a jar she had been meaning to throw away for 2 years. Nadine, coming over for dinner one evening, stopped in front of it. "Why are you keeping that thing?" Renee looked at the candlelight in the photograph, at the slightly wrong angle, at the private dining number half visible at the edge of the frame. "Because it means my son was paying attention," she said, "even when I thought nobody was." Nadine set the table without responding to that. Some things did not need a response. Late one evening in June, Marcus sat at his desk with a new notebook, open, spiral-bound black cover, completely blank inside. He had not yet written anything. He was thinking about what to put on the first page. Across the apartment, his mother was at the kitchen table with her new planner working. A lamp stood between them. The city went on outside the window, a bus below, voices somewhere on the street, the sound the building made at night that both of them had learned without meaning to. Marcus had lived in this apartment his entire life. He knew every sound it made. He looked up once. His mother did not notice. He looked at her for a moment, at her pen moving across the page, at the set of her shoulders, at the lamp's light on the side of her face. He looked the way you look at something you want to remember exactly, even though you are not going anywhere, and neither is it. Then he looked back down at the blank page in front of him. He picked up his pen. He wrote the date at the top. Then below it, he wrote a single line, not a record, not a note, not an entry about something he had witnessed. Just a sentence, quiet, and without audience, for no one but himself. Some things only get counted when someone decides to start counting. He left the rest of the page blank. He closed the notebook. He went to sleep. Renee Carter didn't have connections or a law degree. She had 7 years of honest work and a son who was paying attention when no one thought to look at him. The case wasn't built in a courtroom. It was built at a kitchen table in a homework journal by a 16-year-old who decided that what he knew was worth saying out loud. The sentence that ended Douglas Whitmore's career was 16 words long. The silence it took to get there was 11 days. Both mattered. If this story stayed with you, tell me which moment hit hardest, the notebook, the photograph, or that single sentence under the chandelier. Drop it in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the kind of story that keeps happening here. Stay with us.